So the band got a Billboard hit. Fun fact, that Billboard rock hit, all the backing vocals and all the keys were recorded through a Focusrite Scarlett in my living room. So there you go.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome. My name is Benedict Hein. I am your host, and I'm here with my co-host. He's from Canada. He's been a musician, music producer for most of his career. He's now a mastering engineer running a website called stonemastering.com, and his name is Malcom Owen-Flood. Today, I will introduce Malcom to you. I will tell you why he's the perfect co-host for the show and why he has a lot of value to bring to this podcast and to you as a listener. So let's just jump into it. Here's my interview with Malcom Owen-Flood. Hi, Malc. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again. How are you?
I'm absolutely fantastic. Excited to do this episode. This is episode 2 of our podcast. So we just started doing this and it feels great. And I'm excited.
I am as well, man. This is like for me, it's the morning. I wake up and we get to record these, and it's like such a positive way to start the day. It's exciting.
That's awesome. I have to admit, my brain is already kind of done when we are recording this podcast because it's the evening for me, like after a day of work. So bear with me if I'm not the fastest thinker at this time of the day. So,
I've got the coffee edge on.
Yeah. So today I want to interview you and I want to tell people and show people what you know and that you know a thing or two about audio production. And I want to start off by saying that I think you're the perfect co-host for this podcast because you have basically done it all. I mean, you know, the musician's perspective, because you've been a musician for a long, long time. You started out as a musician. You play in a pretty successful band, you know, so you knew that part of it. You also recorded not only your own band, but tons of bands all around the world. You've worked in rehearsal rooms, in big studios, in project studios, small studios. So the whole 9 yards. You even did film sound and like you've seen all sorts of different scenarios and know how to deal with them, know how to deal with different rooms and all that stuff. So that's perfect. And recently you were transitioning into mastering most of the time because that's kind of a specialty of yours and you're really good at that. And that's also a perspective that's very, very helpful and valuable for our listeners, I think, because a mastering engineer sees things from a different perspective and gets to work with a lot of people, many of them self-recording. So yeah, I'm totally excited to do this. I think this is a perfect fit for the show. And I want to start by asking you how you got started with audio. How did that, just tell us about your journey.
All right. Okay. First off, thank you for the intro. That was like, my ego's just flared up.
Well, it's true.
That was better than a warm cup of coffee. That was awesome. I should have recorded that and played it to myself every morning. That's a little weird.
I mean, it is recorded.
Yeah, I guess so. I'll just listen to them. I'm my own podcast every day.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. So my journey into audio started probably a lot like yours, Benny, and a lot like most of the people that are going to be listening to this, where I wanted to record my own band. So I'd been playing guitar since I was 11 years old, and I was in my first band, I think when I was 13 or 14, and we were just awful. And eventually I started writing my own songs and writing with a band, and that band happened to be an outrageously terrible heavy metal band, and we wanted to record a song. Like, it was one of those things, like I joined the band, we wrote a song the same day, and then we tried to record it the next day. We were just so excited. It was like, oh, like, this sounds amazing, this is the greatest song in the world, we're going to record it. And we tried to and it didn't go very well. There was a number of reasons for that. Like, number one, I think we had one microphone, which was the microphone our singer was holding, right? So we tried to record it live off the one microphone that he was singing into. with all like just the noise in the room bleeding into the microphone, and that obviously didn't sound how we wanted. So from there, the problem solving begins instantly, and we're like, okay, well, why don't we try recording one thing at a time? So we like hung the one mic up above the drum kit, went for it, and that was an improvement. We're like, okay, this could work. So now it's my turn to play guitar to those recorded drums, and we didn't know about click tracks. We didn't have any idea. We didn't even have headphones. So like, how was I meant to play to these recorded drums if I couldn't hear them? So it went terribly. But eventually we did it, and we recorded it, and like you said on the last episode, we did think it sounded good. We thought it was really cool, and I especially thought it was like this amazing thing because we had done it. And I had. Me and my drummer kind of tag teamed the figuring out how to use the DAW. I honestly couldn't even tell you what DAW it was at that point. But pretty much from there, I knew that I was going to be doing that I was going to be recording music. I still at that point thought I was going to be a rock star first and foremost, but I would also be a pro record producer and mixer and everything in between. I thought that was obviously all going to work out. So from there, I got some of my own gear and started recording the same band and another band I was in, and one of those turned out pretty good. And the single, which I admit I didn't record much of, we actually got help with it from another local guy. But he came to my place and did it with us, I think, in our studio, if I recall. And we got that song like a little radio feature on the local station. They played it once, and it was like, oh my God, we're famous. And that was really cool. It's like, okay, we can actually sound good too. Good enough that they played it on the radio. And then at that point, I started getting contacted from other bands. So like bands in my school, like, so yeah, to put that in perspective, this is all going on from me really being 16 to 19 kind of thing. So, well, high school is really when it's happening. And I get contacted from a friend's band, and they want me to record their EP. So I say yes. I bring my gear over to their jam space. We set it up, we record it, and I quickly realized that the band is better than I am at the band is good, and I am not very good at recording. Maybe I'm doing okay at recording, but I definitely realize when I'm trying to mix it that I'm not as good as the band is, and I'm the reason this isn't sounding the way it's meant to. So I made the hard decision for 17-year or 18-year-old ego to send the files to another engineer. So to a big studio, and I convinced the band that they should get their songs mixed by a professional, and they did that. So I sent off the tracks to a studio called the Woodshop Recording Studio. A guy named Zach Cohen runs that. He's an amazing engineer and mixer, and he got the files that I sent him, opened them up, and just like started laughing hysterically at what I had done to them. But he realized that I had put in a lot of work. Because I tried to mix it before I sent it to him. So he got my mix session essentially. And I had this is before Slate Trigger, or at least before I knew Slate Trigger existed anyways. Yeah. So I had oh my God, my drum edits, you're all going to learn what this means if you don't understand what I'm talking about, but Benedict, you'll find it hilarious anyways. That instead of editing all the drums, I just moved the kick drum, so the phase was just,
oh shit,
I'd moved individual drums on the mic, on the kit, not the whole thing, which,
God,
phase is a real thing, folks. And then I had manually found a sample online and just drag and dropped it all over. I didn't even know how to copy and paste stuff, so I just kept downloading the same file, moving it into the session, and moving it in line with the kick.
No way!
It took me hours. Took me hours and hours to sample
kit?
This drum kit, totally out of phase, and probably made it sound worse. So there was a lot of stuff like that. So enough garbage that he essentially scrapped the song I sent him, but he realized that I had put in an unreal amount of hours into this, and what I had recorded apparently sounded all right. So he called me up and was pretty much making fun of me, but then he was like, "Why don't you come by the studio and chat with me?" So I did, and he ended up offering me an internship at his studio.
That's so cool.
in the end, sending off that to get mixed by somebody else and letting go my ego on that ended up scoring me a pretty big thing. And I took the internship and started learning there, sitting in on sessions, cleaning the bathroom, changing the garbage, and slowly kind of learned and kind of earned some respect, and started handling more and more, started handling sessions, started bringing in bands to that studio, because I don't know if people don't really understand interning. Normally the arrangement is that you get access to the studio for your own projects. So I started, kept on recording my own bands at a nice studio in this case, and then and bringing other bands in and kind of building my own clients until eventually to quote it, I graduated, I think, and became an assistant engineer as well as my own business and recording stuff. But that didn't really happen all that quick because there was Band of Rascals in there, which is my band that Benedict mentioned earlier. So we're a rock band, and we kind of got started when I recorded some singles for us. And Benny, if I'm going way off course here, you just bring me in and asking me questions.
Of course.
But
of course.
I think this is important because it ties into our audience and how recording your own music can really change your life. So I learned how to record. I then started this Band of Rascals, and pretty instantly realized that it was a lot better than anything else I'd ever done. And I know that every time you start a new band, you think it's the best thing you've ever done. It's just some weird phenomenon where no matter what, every new song is the best song ever.
The world needed to hear that. So that's what you think. The world waited to hear this new project and those new songs.
It was so much better than anything I'd done before. And I think I recognized that it wasn't necessarily me that made it better. It was the other guys. It was the meshing between us that was new. It wasn't just good musicians in a room. It was good chemistry, and some good songs. So I decided, okay, I got to record these, and I did, and we released them, and we got on the radio pretty quick. A month after we released them, I think we released the EP. We got on the radio, and it started doing really well. We built a fan base super quick. So I don't know, if you guys are in bands, how exciting it is to fill a room with 50 people at first, and then it was 100, and then all of a sudden we had a 250 room. It's every social show just sold out. We just moved to a bigger room and it sold out, and then eventually we were at this venue called Capitol, at that time it was called Sugar Nightclub, but it's a 650 person cap room, and we had 800 people in there. It was just totally illegal, and it was totally insane, and we just were oh my God, this just all happened from recording our songs and people actually connecting with it and becoming real fans. There's this transition from your friends coming to your shows to who are these 800 strangers, right? So cool. So it was amazing. And now I'd really broken a song on radio. I had a song that was getting played quite a lot on, at least locally, on the stations around here. And that was kind of where I launched my production business from and became a full-time audio engineer. Because while I was doing this, while I was interning and assisting and doing some odd recording projects and doing the band thing, I was also doing terrible labor jobs for the most part. And eventually, I won't get too much into it, but eventually I had to make a change. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I decided, okay, I'm going to jump into being a full-time record producer and make it happen. And there's a lot of reasons that's going to be great for me, namely because my band tours a lot and or was touring a lot at that time, and having a day job doesn't work when you're not home.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did it. I jumped off into it, and I gotta say that recording my own band's music and having it have some success was the best business card I could ever have. Right. I had this kind of thing I could point to and say, hey, I recorded this and it got us on the radio and makes a bunch of people show up at our shows. Why don't we try doing that with your band? And that was about like 3.5 years ago, I guess now. And I've been doing it full time since then. Just busy as can be, doing lots of producing and lots of mixing and now a lot of mastering. And it's taken me all over the world. Somehow became a Netflix sound engineer in there too. I don't know. It's been a wild trip, man. Like that's how it looks in my memory, but I'm sure like that doesn't all make sense to you.
It does, and it's really a crazy journey, and I think it's not like the usual type of career because it happened really quickly with all sorts of stuff. Like you experienced it from every possible angle, basically, and that's pretty unique. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on this show. And I'm curious, when you say like this has been 3 years, you said like
it's been 3 years for full-time audio, but the band's probably like 6 years now, kind of thing. So like I was with the band for like that year and a half or 2 years before I went full-time. But I did record that our EP while I wasn't a full-time audio engineer, kind of thing. I just
of course,
did it in.
Yeah. And because I'm asking because I remember, I think the first time I heard of you was you were messaging or emailing me because you went to China. Was it? Yeah, I think you went to China.
Yes.
And you were asking about like how it. I don't even know the question, but anymore. But
I think I remember if you want. I think
of course.
I put a post on forum that you and I are part of, and I was looking to see if anybody had traveled for work like this to another country. And you were like, I've got some experience with this. Feel free to email me and ask me some questions. And I was like, are they going to arrest me if I go to China? like, how does that work? Like, is this legal? I don't understand.
And the thing was, you could have asked about any country, but China, like how am I supposed to know how things work in China?
Yeah, nobody knows how things work in China.
Nobody knows. No, I don't think unless you've been there, I don't think you can say much about that. Like I don't freaking know how things work in China. Still not. But that was the beginning of our relationship, kind of our like we kept in touch since then, and we are in a mastermind group together, and we just help each other out. And I was just asking about the time span because, like, that was when you were contacting me back then. That was like 2 years ago or something like that. Could it be?
Yeah. I think 2 years ago, August, I went to China. So it was probably like 4 months before
almost
that or
3 years.
something that I started talking to you.
Because
approximately.
Because it's so crazy what happened ever since then. With your career, like the film sound thing and the bands you produced, and a lot more traveling after that first trip to China.
Yes,
and it all like if you talk about all those things, it sounds like a decade, but it was all in like 2.5 years.
Yeah,
so that's pretty crazy.
Life can really happen really quick.
Yeah, sure. And like your whole career has been that way. I mean, the first few years, the beginning of all of this was pretty fast as well. Like you were on the radio pretty fast. Like the venues got bigger and bigger. Like it all happened pretty quickly. Like everything you did basically.
Yeah, I think I look
impressive.
At it slightly different because in my mind, I was trying to get on the radio when I was in my first band when I was 13 or something. So I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I've been slogging it out for like over a decade, but in reality, none of that was real.
No. And I'm just saying that because if you're listening to the show and you feel like, man, I'm 30 already or 40 or whatever, like it's too late. I cannot start this. Those guys are way ahead of me or whatever. That's not true.
No.
Like we don't want to give you the impression that you have to make this at that speed and that it's too late for you to make that because it's not. Like you can always start. It's never too late. And I know a lot of people in this industry who got started like very, very late compared to Malc and also compared to myself. And sometimes those careers took like 10, 20 years or something until they really really started being able to make a full-time income or whatever, or to get their band successful or whatever. I mean, so don't feel like you have to be as fast. It's very impressive and cool to hear that it worked, but it's not. It doesn't have to be that way. Just saying that. So when you started out, and when you were starting out, do you remember what which resources did you use back then? Did you just try and error or just a trial and error thing?
Kind of,
or
in terms of recording.
In terms of recording, yeah. When you decided like you wanted to record your band,
Right.
Let's start with another question first. Why did you want to do it yourself, and how did you educate yourself, or did you educate yourself at all?
Right. So, I mean, back when it was the terrible bands that, like, the recordings were terrible as well. Everything was terrible. Actually, the bands were probably better than my recordings made them. But back then, it was mostly just trial and error. I had the gear. It's almost amazing how little I educated myself, because it would have been so much easier if I had just Googled something. So I remember I got Pro Tools, and I immediately started learning on that pretty much. It was the first DAW I ever purchased. And there's something called shuffle mode, which essentially makes your DAW useless if you're trying to record music. Like you can't navigate the session. So if you want to record like the last bar of the song, you have to click record at the beginning and just wait for it to get there. So that's how I recorded for like a year. I thought you just had to like start at the beginning every take, and so if you mess it up, you have to wait another 3 minutes to try again. It was like,
oh shit,
amazingly dumb. So yeah, God, if there's anything that convinces you can do this, you're not as hopeless as I was. I did all sorts of stupid stuff, like coming from a metal background, I wanted that really clicky kick drum, so I taped quarters onto the kick drum skin and smacked. We're like just ruining drum skins essentially. I thought that the gain should be maxed out on my PV6505 because that would sound best, of course. More gain the better.
Of course.
Also not true. Like it was just a lot of experimenting, and then eventually, when I recorded that band that got me my internship, they were called The Accidents, and they went on to get onto the radio with the song I didn't record, by the way, with the song they recorded with the guy I sent them to. So not only did he give me an internship, he stole the band. But he, with them, their music was a lot simpler than what I was doing. Like I was in my metal band, which was just shredding kind of thing, and then I was in a soft rock band that was kind of like Coldplay, but really proggy. So like as complicated as you can make Coldplay, which is the worst thing ever. I mean, I liked it because it's my music, but I understand why most people probably wouldn't. Like people don't listen to Coldplay for complex music, right?
No.
So anyways, it was all very complex. We were just musicians trying to be as good as we could be, and we were showing off in our music essentially. Where this band, The Accidents, was really pop arrangements. They were influenced by the Beatles, so they had their harmonies were kind of interesting, but for the most part it was like verse chorus bridge chorus kind of stuff, and simple beats and leaving lots of space. And I thought, okay, this sounds good, and it's really simple. Maybe I should try going simple on the recording, and stop doing all these weird things and just do what I see at every show I play. Like maybe there was probably a reason they mic the snare drum every time. So and like why they don't like have like 4 mics pointing in different directions on the guitar. They just have an FM57 sitting there. So I thought I'm just going to try going with the bare bones and see what comes of that. And that was easily my best recording, like right away. I just did the simple stuff instead of trying to be weird for no reason. And not that you can't experiment and find cool stuff, but if I now had a baseline. I'm like, okay, I know how to get a good thing, and I can think about how to change it from there, because this is what, like this snare, like if I mic the snare on a normal angle and have it, close to the snare drum, it sounds like the snare drum. So now I know that if I get closer or further, like what that change is going to do. It's not like I'm trying to mic the snare drum with the wrong side of the mic anymore. So that band with their simpler music kind of made me think, okay, I want to try being simple with that. And that obviously worked with me because it landed me my internship. And then I went to the studio and started sitting in on sessions with this, great engineer. And I started noticing that most of the time he was keeping it pretty simple. You don't need 18 mics on the acoustic guitar. You need one usually, maybe 2. And there's just things to worry about more than getting weird with microphones. And
man, that is so true. I want to just real quick, I want to add something to that because before I forget, because that is actually one of the this is a thing that I like, a little pet peeve. Like,
it's a total pet
when
peeve
I
for me too. Yeah.
absolutely, like when I get the sessions to mix or multi-tracks to mix from people, I cannot tell you how often it happens that they use, like, as you said, like 7 microphones on a single guitar or something, but the intonation is just not just off, or they used old strings or whatever, or they make up a drum kit from every possible angle and they kind of daisy chain 2-3 interfaces so that they are able to record 30 channels, but the drums are not tuned and have old heads on them,
totally
and the drummer doesn't
phase,
play properly, and all that stuff, like, and I always think, like, if you would have invested the time, energy, and money that you did to get that many mics in that room and record all that, if you would have invested that in proper tuning, new drum heads, and just finding a spot in the room where it sounds the best and stuff like that, it would have been so much better. And I would so much prefer to have just 8 drum microphones compared to 30 if all those other things are awesome and cared for, and taken care for. So I can absolutely relate to that. I mean, there is the temptation to do it all and to have all these options, but don't do it until you have the basics right. That's so much more important.
Yeah, and don't do it unless you have a good reason. Like,
exactly.
Like, it's not because I thought, like, what will this sound like? It was just like, oh, like, I feel like I've got to do more, was the kind of the reasoning. And then once I got rid of that, then it became, why am I looking for, like, okay, here's what a normal miking sounds like. Why do I want to change it, and how do I want to change it? What are the reasons? Do I want it to sound more roomy? Okay, I'm going to get further off of it, kind of thing. Do I want it to sound more like a thud? I'm going to get closer. And rarely does that mean another microphone. It's just changing the one microphone.
Absolutely.
The simpler I got, the better I got, and like just mastering the basics, kind of thing. And not only that, it made me quicker. So the other musicians in the room were able just to kind of get in the zone more. It just started, like, it made the songs come to life quicker, as well. So like when you can see the progress of the project you're on, of the song you're building, it's so much more satisfying. You don't get lost in it. You don't kind of get bored of it. If you can get it all cut in a pretty short amount of time, you're just going to be, like, ecstatic with it, and you can carry that energy into the mix if you're going to do the mix yourself. So that was kind of where education started coming. The internship, I personally owe a lot to my internship. But the next stage, I say that kind of got me to the normal sound engineer level, where I was doing things the normal way, and things were in phase. Chances are what I was recording didn't sound terrible. When I went full time, so after I made my, like, the song that got on the radio with Band of Rascals, kind of using that methodology. But then when I went full time, there was 2 main influences. There was now I have to survive, so I have to be better at this, or nobody's going to hire me, kind of thing. So I went and found online resources, just like what you're doing, Benny, and that was great. And then the other thing I did was we hired a record producer for our next album, and I just followed him around like a shadow. I just, like, we were lucky enough, like, some listeners might know who he is, but his name's Eric Ratz, and he's produced, like, Billy Talent and Monster Truck and Arkells, all these really big bands. He's got some huge awards, and in my eyes, he's one of the best rock producers and mixers on the planet. So he was, like, the most, like, perfect guy for me to model, and I say model, but, like, if I try and do exactly what he did, it doesn't work out. But I did learn a lot. And mostly what I learned, again, was not about where to place the mic. It was mostly about how to get the player to play it the way you want it to be played, or need it to be played. So that there's some emotion in the takes, and they're tight and accurate. Those guitars are more in tune than you believe possible. So I just learned so much from, pretty much putting myself in a room with somebody better than me, and just absorbing it, that, and then I did the same thing online. I consumed content.
Yes.
And like it's kind of like putting yourself in the room with them. Like if there's a video of you, Benny, like miking up a cab, like that is more than I will get from a photo of like a live concert, or I'll get from a blog article, because you're actually seeing it and you're hearing it at the same time. So that's really where education came in for me, was like the original internship, and then the furthering it online and shadowing people that are miles ahead of me, I guess. Still are. He's way better than me, but I think I've since become a professional in this field. Lots to learn though. You're always learning.
You can absolutely say that you are, and but that's true. The learning never stops, and it should never stop. You should never feel that you now know it all and you don't have to educate yourself anymore. So the self-education obviously plays a big role, and also the paying attention just to what others do, because that's also something that I found really interesting in what you just said, that you basically became the shadow of another producer and just observed and learned and paid attention. Because we as creatives, as musicians, oftentimes what we believe is it's hard to let go of that, and it's there's always ego, and there's always our view of things, and it's hard to let go, and it's hard to just observe, pay attention, take advice, actually try it and see if it works. I see so many musicians, you can tell them 100 times that it's better and absolutely worth it to change your strings on your bass guitar before you record, but still they won't believe because they think it's not. And they don't have a reason for it. They just think it's not because they always did. So they don't. You can tell them 100 times, but I just don't be that person, please. If people who've obviously done what you're trying to do, if there are people who have done this and you're trying to do it, why not listen? Why not take their advice? You can always go back to what you wanted to do if you think it's really better, but just give it a shot. Just be open and try it, and that's what you did, obviously.
That's you just summed up exactly what I could have condensed my whole philosophy into. My whole story comes down to just realizing that I could learn from other people really quickly if I listened to them, and watch them. And I took that philosophy with my band as well. My band was starting off, we released a cool tune, people are liking it, but there's this band in town, guy named Jesse Roper, who's slaying it. He's killing it. He just did a show for 4,000 people. Our city is not that big. He's the only guy that can do that. And I just attached myself at the hip with him. I actually ended up in his band for a while. And that really worked, we got a manager because of it. I just once I realized that I could shadow people and absorb their what they're doing right, it changed everything. And if there's any advice I would recommend, is don't listen to the grumpy sound guy who tells you bass strings don't need to be changed. It's always the sound guy, man.
It can. That's true. That's true as well. Yeah, and also just one more thing on the bass strings thing. I've actually heard that argument or that reasoning a couple of times, and it's also not true, because I heard a couple of people tell me they don't need to change their strings because X, Y, and Z famous bass player on that record didn't do it and it sounded great. Yes, but you are not that bass player. He probably had a reason to do that, and you just cannot. It's almost never a good idea to assume that you are the absolute outlier unicorn bass player that can do that. You're probably not. You can say, well, but this is a famous bass player and he did that, so I follow him. But that's the exception, and it's not the same situation. And I would also say that in many of those situations, those people didn't make it sound great because they used old strings, but despite the fact that they used old strings, because the way they play and whatever, it's the whole picture. It's not just the old strings; those are not the reason for a great record, you know.
Yeah,
So
there's a great
that's just
warning.
that. But
there.
I've actually heard that. I've actually heard that a couple of times from people, and that's enough for them to convince them that they can do that as well.
Oh yeah, people
So,
like
yeah.
to believe convenient truths, right? And it's way cheaper to not change your bass strings if you're lazy and
Yeah.
cheap. So I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a good,
I get it.
that's a
I get
good
it as
like
well.
warning, right? Is especially even people listening to learn from us is that you have to look for the constants. So we might recommend something, and it might be true, but it like if I say. Like for example, we both agree changing bass strings is a good idea, and most people do. So that's probably more likely true than the inverse. There might be something we say on this podcast, like you and I might disagree on something, and most likely the guy that says what most other people agree with is telling the most accurate. That's where you should start. Start with that. Like start with the more popular opinion, and see how that works for you. There's a lot of wisdom in that. You can't copy everything, but you can copy a lot.
Absolutely. And you should, in fact, if you were trying to do this to learn quickly and do stuff on your own without like spending 20 years and getting all the experience and stuff, and if you're not trying to become a professional producer making hit records, but if you're a musician trying to record your own band, you got to learn quickly. It's not useful if you acquire the skills over a period of like 15 years. You want to record now or next year or whenever. And in order to do that, I think there's no way around following what others do and just trying to reproduce those results for yourself. There's no way around. There's no way you can learn it from scratch without this. It's just not possible. So back to your story. So you kind of observed other people, you learn from them, and then you started educating yourself with online resources and probably some reading, watching videos, whatever. What did you find? Like, were there things that just were hard to do yourself, even after like educating? Was there stuff that you read about and thought this should work, and then you tried it and it just didn't work, and it was kind of frustrating? Was there a moment like that?
Yeah, mixing was a big one. Mixing, I think, takes a long time to develop, and it's almost to the point where, like, I think everybody should try it, but if you're like doing this from the perspective of trying to be in a band, and trying to like learning these skills to develop your band, you're way better off investing those in and your time into engineering than you are into mixing, because I think the mixing skill set is takes a lot longer to develop. The gear you need is more expensive and specialized, and like it's almost like more niche than engineering is, where like these engineering skills are going to help you record your band. They're going to help you sound better live. They're going to help you become a better musician. So once I was really getting into the weeds with it and learning more about mixing, I had to kind of realize that I only needed to learn these skills if I really wanted to become a mixer. And at that point I was like, okay, I do. So I made that fork in the roads, right? And learned that. But that took a long time. And, I'm always learning there still. Everybody always is. You're always trying new things. That kind of stuff I found really tricky. Managing musicians, that was a big one, because not all musicians are equal in skill or attitude or emotional stability. And that goes for your own band as well. You got to learn how to maybe especially your own band, because if you've been in a band with somebody for years, chances are you've had some arguments, and things get when you get more, you become family with those people, so you become less afraid to like, I don't know, you would never argue with a stranger or a client, but you can argue with your brother. So, like if you're a singer and you are clashing, but you still got to get that takedown, and you still have to make them sound good, right? You have to learn how to navigate that and coach them and put that stuff aside. And so that was a big learning curve for me, was like the people management kind of side of thing. And then let me think on that, like stuff that was guitars. Guitars are hard to record, man, especially if you're doing distorted rock guitars. I mean, they're not until you learn the key components of it. But up until a certain point, my guitars were really out of tune. And I don't know if you have any content on that on your course, and if we should just send people there to learn that stuff. But essentially, there's some really simple ways to make your guitar recordings sound insanely better, and you would just never think to do them. Like they're not very logical. Like just getting intonation to match on doubles is like it all makes sense once you're doing it. But it's
so true.
Essentially, the long story short is don't record full passes of guitars of an entire song if you can at all avoid it. That's a whole topic. We won't get into that.
Do the double right after the first take without tuning in between them.
Yes,
that's another one.
Exactly. It's like do as short as you can do with keeping the feel of the riff alive, and don't tune between the takes. So record the left, instantly record the right. Listen to them. If they sound tight and you nailed the performance and the tuning sounds tight between them, you're good. If you do a little mistake, you're gonna have to tune again and record both sides again.
Exactly.
Yeah, that really sums it up.
Yeah,
and your guitar
or get an
Evertune before this.
Or get an Evertune.
Or get an Evertune. Yeah, I still haven't, but I will.
Me too. No, that's very important. True. So intonation and guitars. That's a big one. I think I was thinking what I meant with this question was, I mean, those are pretty good examples, but I was going for something like where you thought you read something and you're like, cool, I can do that, and then you just tried it, but for some reason you couldn't without somebody actually showing it to you. I mean, mixing is probably one of those things. It looks so easy. It makes so much sense if you read a book about mixing, for example, but then if you try to actually mix, it still doesn't work all of a sudden. So that's maybe an example. But I don't know. Maybe there were some things you couldn't figure out until you saw somebody do it.
Yeah, like with that guitar doubling stuff that we were just talking about, I picked that up off of Eric Ratz while we were recording our last or our previous album. So that was like the light bulb went off. Like I've been recording guitars. I even got some on the radio. Like they were sounding okay, I guess, but I couldn't figure out why it didn't sound like this huge modern tight wall of guitars. And then when we started tracking, his assistant engineer Ryan Jones, who was tracking with me, handling guitars, was just like beating me to a pulp with tuning, just like every take, tune. What are you doing? Tune. I was like, oh my God, this is what it takes. And then he blew my mind. Like we spent like a week on guitars. Pretty much I was getting like one song done a day on guitar, which is it's like an 8-hour day on one song. Like we were spending a lot of time. And then I was like, this is outrageous. And he was like, we spent 6 months on the guitars for Billy Talent. I was like, 6 months. Like
put that into perspective.
Like that's something else, right? So that put it into perspective for me. I was like, okay, like it's the devil's in the details. We got to just like really hone in on these things. That was like a big light bulb moment for where I just wouldn't have figured it out until I was in that situation,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense, and I think it's totally natural for people as musicians not to realize how much it actually takes, because you tend to think like you can play your song. Why would it take so long? I mean, the song's 3 minutes. I may try it 3 or 4 times and then it's done. That's what musicians basically think. So actually, somebody said that to me at some point. I can't remember who it was. I think somebody, when I was starting out, somebody went who was not a musician at all, but he went into the studio. He was a friend of a band that I was recording. And he was asking what we're doing, and I was explaining it to him, and he couldn't get why it would take that long to record one song. And his exact words were like, the song is 3 minutes long, so it should take you 3 minutes to play and record it,
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's
and I have to say I get it. I mean, how would you know, And as a musician, you also think you might know that it takes a couple of times to get it right, the performance and stuff, but still you probably are far from realizing how much attention to detail it actually takes to make it sound like your favorite records.
Yes. I mean, like that's really all budget is. Like those big budget records aren't necessarily more of anything other than time. They're just putting more time and detail into it. And taking more time to get the perfect tone, and that is that's the huge advantage of learning to record yourself, is you have that time. You're not paying hourly studio rates. Like that record I made with Eric Ratz was outrageously expensive, like shockingly expensive. And I learned a lot, but like, wow. And so if you can learn from us without having to do that, go and spend crazy amounts of money on a record, which is an insane idea, by the way, because records don't make a lot of money if you're unaware. But like, it's just all about putting in that time. Like, like another cool thing that we started doing was we shot out every guitar we had for that song. So I would try out like 12 guitars. I'd play like a bar of the verse and a bar of the chorus, and we'd listen to it in context with the song. And we had the engineer or somebody, whoever was at the computer, play it back without telling everybody else in the room which tape we're listening to. And we would all be like, okay, number 3. And it was like always, everybody was like the same one. And we didn't know what guitar that was. And it was always like, it surprised us a lot of the time. And what awesome. That it's a great idea. We just had to trust our ears, which guitar suited the song. And it wasn't the red one I wanted to play. It was the black one, or like, it was like, and it's not the easiest guitar to play, but it sounds better. So it's the one we're going to use for that song.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, he was telling us about that Billy Talent record and like a big record he did. Speaking of which, if you guys are guitar players, go check out Ian Thornley. He's a god. But they shot out strings. They like set up the guitar with like different gauges of strings, different types of strings, and they spent a day shooting out strings for the record to figure out which strings actually sounded the best. I'll wait until we get a gear sponsorship later in this podcast to say who it was. Yeah.
I hope so.
But like, that's an extreme example. Nobody, like, I wouldn't even recommend that. That's a huge amount of time to spend, but that's what their budget was. They spent thousands of dollars finding out which type of string sounded best for the record. So that's the extreme example. So choosing what really matters and shooting that out, it was like a really important thing for me to learn. And just getting away from the ego of like, oh, this is my guitar, this is the one we're going to use, and being able to talk bands that were coming to record with me out of the same thing. Like, oh, I see you play a Strat. That's really not going to be the sound for your AC/DC kind of rock band. We're going to want to grab some humbuckers for this kind of thing. And you just got to kind of turn on their ears, because they're going to be resistant at first. And like, most people listening to this are probably in bands. So take this into, I'll kind of turn this into an example you can relate to. The other guitarist in your band, or if you're a guitarist, or if you're not the guitarist might want to use their guitar, and their guitar might not be the right song. So you have to convince them. Convincing them to change is hard, but convince them to record their guitar and another just for the giggles, just for shits and giggles, and then listen to it back blindfolded kind of thing, or just don't tell them which one they're hearing and ask them which one they like. You can avoid these kind of problems within your band and avoid bruising egos and their attachment to their gear by doing kind of stuff like that. I don't know. I kind of got off on a tangent here, but
no, that's super cool and so true, because it always comes down to the same thing. So much of your progress and that what made it possible for you to develop your skills that quickly was that you were open for new ideas, open to what other people did and the advice they gave you, and you just tried stuff out and then decided and chose what worked best without like letting your ego or whatever get in the way. So it always comes down to that in that story, and that's super cool to hear, because that's really what's holding a lot of people back. And it even goes as far as not only which guitar you use or which strings you use, but sometimes, and that's even harder, but necessary at times. Sometimes there is one guy in the guitar or girl who is the rhythm guitarist, and he or she just plays really tight and awesome. And then there's the second guitarist who plays the same riffs in some parts of the songs live, but he or she is just not as tight.
Yeah.
So when you record, you might have to make the decision that one person is doing all the rhythms because that's what works and that's what gets it done faster and makes the record better.
Yes.
And so the other one might have to be okay with that and say, okay, I'm fine. Like, it's whatever makes the record better. I don't have to play that part. You can do that, and I will play the leads or whatever. And those are tough decisions to make, but they like if you're able to do that, I think you're making progress much faster, and you're not like standing in your own way all the time. And big bands do that as well, by the way. I mean, look at Metallica. I mean, Hatfield plays the rhythms, he does it on the left side and the right side. It's his guitar. It's super tight. It's super in sync, And then there's Kirk Hammett, and he does solos, or most of them. So I don't think there is ever, maybe there has been in this case, but I don't think there is ever an argument about that if it makes the record better. And like, you have to let go of your ego there. And as you said, that's hard, and it's hard to make people change. That's also a tough one, and you always got to do it without like hurting anybody. And there's ways to do that, and the blind test thing is always a good thing to do, because then they made the decisions themselves, and you don't have to convince them.
I think you're right, though. The player thing is even more important, but even harder to change, because now there's just no way to not bruise an ego.
Absolutely. And I've heard stories from producers who actually kicked out the drummer of the band and said, we got to bring in another person because he's just not cutting it, And I've never been in that situation, but I've definitely been in situations where that would be the best decision. That would have been the best decision for the record. And I mean, obviously, you cannot just. It's hard to do that in your band, but just think about what's the goal and what is necessary to do that. Maybe programming some stuff will get you better results than actually playing it. And who cares, as long as the record is good in the end? Just
serve the song.
Be open for suggestions and ideas.
The more you make the entire project about the song and less about you guys or you girls or like the band, like that's what, like, you're not making, well, maybe you are making the song for you, but if you're trying to do this for a career, you're trying to make the song for other people to connect to. So you got to serve the song and not make the song serve you. Otherwise, you've made this piece of art that sounds the way you wanted it to, but isn't going to connect with everyone else, kind of thing, right? Or not even sounds the way you want it to. It just sounds like your gear, kind of thing, maybe, or like sounds like your ego. But if you kind of like just listen in context with the song and how all those parts are playing together, you're going to make decisions that just make the song more accessible and more pure in what it's meant to actually be. That's pretty artsy-fartsy, but I think it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. So to get back to your story there, what happened after that? So you went full time. You traveled a lot. You've observed all those people. You developed your skills. You got booked more. You got maybe the budgets of your productions that you did became bigger, and you could do more with artists. Like, what were some milestones, and what happened? What happened then? Until now?
So both kind of parts of my life kept on growing kind of beside each other, and maybe because of each other a little bit. So the band kept on doing more and more. We got, from the radio, we got a manager. From the manager, we got an agent. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. She'll be quiet eventually. So manager led to the agent. The agent led to bigger gigs and more tours. We went and did a Europe tour, and we started getting like bigger shows. Like we did. My dog is coming in.
Wow, she's actually coming in. I can see her. You guys can't see her right now, but I actually saw the dog come in. That's true.
I'm going to close my door real quick.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, she knows how to open the studio door. She'll be a cameo in a couple episodes, I'm sure. So we, like, in band life, things started, like, were a lot of fun. We toured a lot, which, if anybody's toured a lot, it's something else. It's a lot of good and a lot of bad. And then we played some of the best gigs of our lives. Like we did like this big Canada Day celebration, and in Canada Day is a big deal. You'd be surprised to know, but like there was like 10,000 people at this gig, and we got some festivals like with 5 to 10,000 people, and it was just like the big leagues. It felt amazing. So that all went great, and then but the touring was going so hard that I kind of realized, like, okay, we kind of like commit all to this. because when I'm on the road, I'm doing very little producing and mixing work, pretty well zero. That's my focus. Or I do this other thing I love, recording and mixing and mastering bands. And that's the route I've kind of favored. So the band has slowed down a lot over the last year, especially. And I've been doubling down onto recording and making that kind of more my focus. Which is probably like with a listener base for this podcast mostly being people in bands, they probably think I'm just this crazy person to do that. But
yeah, probably
different folks, different strokes, right? And like you'll be amazed to find out what part of the field you like. I thought touring was going to be my favorite part, but it was probably my least favorite part. And I like the creation of recording. I liked being in the studio with my band more than anything, other than those crazy big shows. The big shows were everybody loves those. Sure. But I didn't like the parts in between as much, and I love every day in the studio. So I made that change, and I've been focusing more on mastering, especially these days. And it just keeps me busy as can be. I guess I should probably mention that the whole Netflix thing, because that's consumed my life recently as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that, like, talking about things happening quick, that was August. I got a text message of all things from the guy I know that started this documentary series, and asking me if I wanted to record audio and like in the field with him. And it just, like, to summarize, it's a documentary on rhythm, and they're recording rhythm all over the world. So, like, I've been on like 30 planes in the last month. It's been insane. So I go around with them and record this kind of stuff. And so I am essentially producing, mixing, and mastering every day that I'm home. And then for the rest of it, I'm gone on the road with these guys, and just kind of.
Is this a Netflix original thing? Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, won't spend too much time on that because that's not what this is about, but I'm sure it's kind of interesting to folks, is that a lot of those Netflix original shows aren't actually made by Netflix. They're made independently, self-financed, or like, not really self-financed, but privately financed, I guess is how you put it. And then Netflix buys the rights. So you make it's kind of like getting signed. There's a big parallel here.
Yeah.
You self-produce your record, you shop it around to a label, and then they kind of buy the rights to it, and it becomes Atlantic record release kind of thing. You know?
Okay, awesome.
So that's kind of how Netflix can work as well. So they're signed up to be the ones releasing this documentary that I'm working on, and we got a lot of shooting still to do, a lot of trips to go. I'm in Miami and Trinidad in about a week and a half. Separately, they're not the same place. But it's been a whirlwind, and it's been pretty cool because it's so different than working in a controlled studio space. So I'm learning a lot there. I'm just being open to that, and it's letting me focus in a way more on the mastering, because I like when I'm gone, I'm just totally focused on something else. And then I come back and I can just like redirect on like with full passion. It's almost like a vacation, You just come back fresh, and I just hit it super hard and put out some songs. Yeah.
Super awesome. And like, let's talk about the mastering thing. Why did you want to become
a mastering
why did you want to become a mastering engineer? Like, why? Because I mean, I get it from like, depends on how you look at it. I get it, but if I put myself into the shoes of a musician, mastering is kind of first of all, it's kind of a dark art and to many people, and second of all, it's this techie, nerdy, like detail work, and like the least creative part of the process, so to speak. So
that's what I thought when I started.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. What did you get? What got you excited about mastering?
There is a lot of responsibility when you produce a song, and I found that I have a sound. So when I produce a song, or mix a song, or both, which often happens, I can hear myself all over that song, regardless to if I played a word, like a note. I could pick it out of a crowd of 100 songs and be like if I'd somehow forgotten which songs I'd recorded, and there was a Spotify playlist and a song I came on did, I'd be like, that was obviously me. Like it's got a sound, and that is kind of cool, I guess, but it isn't necessarily what I want to be, because I want to serve the song as best as I can. And then I got offered some mastering gigs, and I did them, and I didn't notice that I had worked on it. I made the song better, and I was like, "This sounds like I did a good job. This sounds awesome." And the artist was super happy, and it did really well for them. And I was like, I just came in and I improved the song, and that's kind of like my philosophy, is just coming in and serving the song. So mastering, that's all I can do. I don't have enough power to really like put my fingerprint on it, right? Because it's just a mix coming to me, and I can just kind of shape it and direct it a little bit if it needs it. Even that's the other beautiful thing about mastering, is if it doesn't need me, I don't have to do anything. Where mixing, you have to do something. So like if they nailed it, I just turn it up, and I call it done. Like I've got the do no harm mentality. Like I'm not going to just change something for the sake of it. So that really works for me. It also really works just with my lifestyle, like especially on this like travel thing, turnarounds. A song doesn't take very long to master, especially compared to a mix, and especially compared to a production, So somebody needs something mastered, I can get it done real quick. I don't have to commit a week of my time to it. So that really works with my lifestyle and what I'm doing. And then there's I've always been one of those guys that tends to do something I'm good at. So I'm not good at basketball, so I didn't play basketball. I tried it and I was like, okay, I'm garbage at this. And I obviously believe I can learn stuff, but I tend to play to my strengths because it's a little more fun. And I seem to be good at mastering, so I'm sticking with it and just doubling down on that skill and really enjoying it. And I also love that it's like I get to work with so many people. Rather than working with the same client for an extended period, I'm just like meeting so many new people, helping so many people. I love seeing them release. Like there's a guy, Australian rapper called FJ that I master for, and he's planning to release a song every week this year, which is just like every week I get an Instagram tag of this cool release. And he's just so stoked, and I'm like, this is awesome. I see people sharing it and stuff, and it's like, I don't know. So it's like instant gratification. It's almost like social media fast food for me.
Oh, well, that's cool. But that mostly works, I would say, with that high output, that mostly works for like electronic music or stuff that's made inside a computer.
That's a different thing.
I cannot imagine a band recording and releasing a song every week. No. I mean, you could do that, but like that's much more possible in the electronic or world or rap world or whatever. Because also those artists most of the time or often are not only self-producing, but mixing themselves as well, and then just hire a mastering engineer. I see that a lot of times. That's pretty common with electronic music, that the producer is at the same time the artist and the mixer, and they kind of put something together. It sounds great, but not maybe translates that well or whatever, and then they send it to a mastering guy. So I see that a lot, and I assume it's the same here, probably, right? It's probably a guy with a computer and a microphone.
A little bit different.
Right?
He's an oddity in that genre, where he's a smart guy. He's built a team, so he's got this guy Ryan in I think Seattle who mixes for him and does make some beats. Cool. But like he has some real guitars and stuff in there, and then I think he hires different beat producers. But he's not just finding beats and ripping them off YouTube. They're being crafted for him, kind of thing. Yeah. And I think he does some of his own as well. But then he kind of sends it off to be kind of worked on. So he's built this team that just like, and it's like this smooth system. I just get an email from Ryan. I'm like, all right, here I go. I pull it up, and it's just kind of a system almost, because he's sending me so much stuff. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, you gotta have a system to make that work.
Yeah.
You gotta have some sort of team and system and workflow, because like that's impressive actually. Record and release a song every week is what you should do these days. Maybe not every week, because that's not possible for everybody, but frequently.
Frequently, yes.
And be like that. That's just how it works. That's just how people consume music these days, and it's very smart from like a business standpoint as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is, it's like it keeps like the flow going, like you just keep going, you just never stop, you keep being creative. And I guess if you can put out a song every week, you are able to focus on what you are really good at and your strength, and then have other people do what they are good at, and that's probably good for the end result. So that's pretty impressive and interesting.
Yeah, it is cool. And people, I think some people don't believe this, but it's totally true, is that creativity is a skill you can develop and improve on.
Yes.
People think maybe like that you just use it up kind of thing, like it's this depleting resource kind of thing. But I don't believe that. I think it's that like, and the people that pump out stuff like this consistently are proof of it. They just get better and better at it. Like his stuff is quality and he's making it quick. And he's getting better at recording it instantly. You know, it's like this feedback loop that just gets better and better and louder, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool to hear. And like from a mastering perspective, I guess you are working with like with many people who produce and record themselves, and also probably a couple of bands who do that. Is there like a common theme or some common things that you see, especially in recordings that people make themselves, recordings and or mixes?
Like kind of like some error spots, maybe.
So that or maybe also the other side, like maybe there are also positive things that you hear in those recordings. I don't know, but I guess most of the time, there will probably be common errors and mistakes. Like
common errors are the ones that are like, I mean, that's the first thing I meant to look for, right? Is like what they overlooked, and try and figure out a way to eliminate that problem. Quick side, Brant. The other thing I love about mastering is that I'm just constantly working with different genres. Like it's never boring. It's just like a new situation on my desk, a little new problem to solve every day. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to, I think, hone in on rock and pick on the rock guys.
Yeah.
Because rock being very rock only meaning anything with live drums and guitars, pretty much.
Yeah, let's say band music.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff recorded with a band. So that could be country, rock, folk, whatever, alternative, metal. Drum phase is like so commonly missed, and if I can tell the drums are out of phase after you've mixed it, that's bad news. So that's probably a twofold problem. There's probably not understanding how drum phase works and how basic miking, you know, going back to just using a simple miking setup at the beginning will solve a lot of that for you. But understanding how drum phase works, but also probably mixing in a situation where you can't tell what's going on at all. Like some of these songs could have been 100 times better if they had just had a friend that understood drum phase look at that mix before it got committed and sent to me, kind of thing, you know? Like I try to like rectify that. I try to message them and be like, hey, you go into your mix, flip this, it's going to sound crazy different and better, but you're going to have to adjust some stuff because of it and kind of remix. But they're not always willing, and they just don't, I don't know, it's like they don't understand or hear phase, but I do. And I think most people do. So drum phase is the big thing that I noticed is missed a lot. Like go onto Benny's site there and read up on drum phase. I'm sure there's something there for you. And then high end treble. There's definitely a theme where people are putting, I would say, this is a little bit of assumption, but I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on this, where they're putting an EQ on their mix bus. And if for those who don't know what a mix bus is, a lot of people will send all of the tracks in their session to a single stereo channel where they can throw compression or EQ on it and it affects everything. A lot of people tend to throw an EQ on there and boost a lot of high end. But high end is a weird thing where because your things are getting louder and brighter, you think it sounds better and better. But once you actually volume match it and compare it, it doesn't always sound better. I mean, there's definitely times where, like, I edit high end onto masters all the time, but I'm very careful with it. I'm careful about where I'm adding that high end because high end is a very broad range. So I get a lot of things that are just over bright. And there's such a thing as good sounding dark recordings. So
exactly.
I think people are just scared to release dark recordings, kind of thing.
I think that's actually a big one with the dark recordings, and I struggled with that for a long time.
Me too.
I used to compare my mixes or recordings against other stuff, and when other stuff was brighter, also it fit the other song and not mine, but I always felt like, oh shit, I'm too dark. That sounds dull. That sounds lifeless.
Yeah.
Not exciting enough. And I was really afraid to just stick with the dark sound and see that it actually like fits the song.
Yeah.
I was afraid to do that, and it's totally true. It's a true thing, and I think. Yeah, go ahead. Maybe I'll add that later if you're not. Maybe you do, but
yeah.
if
Well,
you
like
don't say what I'm about to say, I'll add that later. Let's see.
Okay, yeah. Visualizing, like this is a good way and useful way that'll I think just help everybody instantly if you visualize mixes like this. If you have a mix and you make something brighter, it's going to seem less bassy. So like a lot of people don't understand that. They think that like the bass is just going to stay the same, right? You didn't change it. But you changed how we're going to perceive it because we're going to perceive that loud information more now. So we perceive, as a result, the low information as quieter. So you can't just add more without taking away. Anything you add is taking away from somewhere else. So it's much more about balance than about bright or dark kind of thing. So a dark mix is bassier than a bright mix kind of thing, right? That's a weird topic and it's very vague, and you can obviously have a tight low end and still be bright. But like, just don't, when you're comparing mixes, because a lot of people do compare their mixes, don't be fooled into thinking your mix needs to be something it's not just because of another song. It's a real, like, you just gotta, it's one of those, you just have to fail until you figure it out kind of situations. Every engineer I know has gone through this phase of ruining their mixes until they figure it out.
Yeah.
And if you want to play it really safe, print a mix with all your 2-bus processing and without your 2-bus processing at the end. Just take it all off and do another print, and then volume match them and compare them and see if you actually made an improvement.
True.
Until you get good at it, you'll be amazed at how much you've been messing things up.
True. Like, and you basically said what I wanted to add to this high end thing, because I guess what happens then is like you hear less bass, and then in an effort to compensate for that, people might be tempted to turn in like to dial in more bass or like low end, and then they crank like the 50 or 60 or something, or like do weird things to the low end. And I think that's also like the too bright mixes is a thing, and there's also many amateur mixes and recordings have this boomy, totally uncontrolled low end, and sometimes that might actually come from trying to make a very bright mix and then trying to compensate for it by adding more bass, and then they create like really weird EQ curves in an effort to make it sound the way they want to.
Absolutely, yeah. That's definitely the other common weak spot is the low end for sure. It's exactly what you're saying. It's just not really understanding the way to problem solve. And adding is the kind of the wrong way. Usually, I mean, I've got nothing against adding EQ. I do it all the time, but it's not necessarily the way to solve a problem. And so you're like, oh, my mix isn't bright enough. You add high end. My low end is like not hitting hard, so I turn it up kind of thing. Like, it's like, no, it's the problem's back at your kick drum. You got to like take all that off and go back to the first step. You know, the first thing you probably soloed was your kick drum or your snare or something, right? And you got to start there and figure that out.
Yeah. Okay, though, but the low end, high end thing, it is a production thing, but it's also mainly a mixing thing.
Right.
Are there common like recording errors or stuff like that? Or
so there was the phase thing. There was that.
Yeah.
There is over distorted guitars are a really common thing. I'm sure you find that with mixes that are sent to you as well. They're tracked just like people overcompensate. It's the same thing as what we were just talking about. Kind of, you're just trying to like, you just think, okay, I'll just keep giving it more to try and get it aggressive, but it's probably too much. So guitars are distorted too much is a really common one. And then like when you distort a guitar, you get more white noise and you get less note and less low mid information kind of thing. So you just get less of a thick guitar. And when that's a good thing to A/B. When you A/B like a good guitar mix, I don't know, any example, with like a really distorted guitar, you'll notice that the guitars are really clean. They're not clean, but the aggressive isn't like the aggressive qualities of distorted guitars isn't always coming from distortion. It's coming from the player. So I do notice some weak guitars. As we mentioned, the tuning on guitars, I notice that all the time, that the tuning of the doubles is really, really loose. So, I mean, we really got to keep covering that each episode so people figure that out.
Yeah, we do. We absolutely should.
We'll change music if we keep talking about that. It'll lead.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Tune a lot, but just the perfect amount.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are pretty big ones. And I agree. I see those a lot as well.
I also noticed that tuning also applies to bass.
So much.
Like, yeah, if you can't get a tight low end, your bass guitar is probably out of tune, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's why I always tell people, actually, just to add that in there, I always tell people, try recording, or actually do record the guitars before you record the bass. That's a big thing I always tell people, because, I mean, you can do a scratch bass or whatever if you need that to play to it or whatever, or you can program a MIDI bass and then play the bass to that, but like judging the intonation and properly making decisions, like when you're hearing a bass on its own, it's so hard to do, because you, like, in this fundamental, like the range where the fundamentals of the bass are, it's so much harder to tell, like, a few cents up and down, like as it is like higher up in the register where we just hear it better.
Right.
And you think you have a perfectly in tune bass, and then you record the guitars on top of it, and it just falls apart, and you just don't know, is it the guitar, is it the bass, what is it, it's just wrong. And so it's always, in my opinion, for that reason alone, there's other reasons to that as well, but for that reason alone, I always recommend having either a guide track that's super in tune, or just don't record the bass before you record other instruments.
We found our first difference, our first point of conflict.
Okay, all right. So, now I'm curious. Explain.
I used to record guitars first, and then I changed to bass. And I do see your point there, but I find maybe, I don't know. I guess I should try your way again. But I found that guitars were getting recorded out of tune, and then. Just like being like, okay, I think that sounds good. But then the bass comes in, and it's like that low D string, really, like, say it's a drop D hard rock song that like wasn't as tight as I thought it was, kind of thing. Once there's like a steady bass reference pitch kind of thing. But I do track bass watching that tuner. Like, I've got a tuner on display. I'll even sometimes run auto tune on my bass track, so it's tuning it like that 5 cents as well, kind of thing. And then I record guitars to that. The other reason I like it is I think I find it's easier to make a guitar tone to a bass tone than the other way around. So like I've got a drum kit, and then I can make a bass tone that really digs in well with that kick drum kind of thing, like it fits there in that area. And then I bring my guitars and make it fit to everything, that foundation layer kind of thing, so I can choose a tone better. But that's how I do it.
Exactly. That's very interesting, because I totally get what you're saying, and I don't even disagree. It just goes to show that there are no hard rules, again, and that like everybody has to find a way that gets them to the same result. I mean, we both obviously like in-tune instruments and the low end that works, and we both get it done, but differently. So obviously both approaches are right. That's interesting, actually. But still, the point that we agree here on is you have to make sure the bass is in tune, and the instruments are in tune, and then. Like, maybe a good compromise, and I do that actually a lot of times, is if it depends on the complexity of the song, but most of the time it's pretty quick and easy to just program a MIDI bass or something, and then just use that as a reference, and then track whatever you want to that, just as a tuning reference.
Absolutely. And maybe
that helps. And
like an even better suggestion, and like I should probably do this more, talking about like letting go of egos of just doing things for no reason, is record whoever is like obvious, like, and this only applies when there's like one person that's obviously way better. But if the bass player is nowhere near on the level of the rhythm guitarist, you should totally track that rhythm guitarist first, because he's going to play it. He's going to get the emotion down so that bass player has to play to that. Like, like you want it to just come together emotionally and groove wise, right? So if the bass player is like kind of like the person you're going to have to like kick in the butt to get on like the level of the song, go with the guitarist. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stop here and save that conversation for another episode, because I got more to add to that, and it's like I could go on forever about this, and we will make an episode about guitar recording, not just one, many, and then we will talk about that. But that's good to know that we disagree here, and this is gonna make future episodes even more exciting, because I'm gonna come up with arguments for my point of view here. I'm not sold yet, but okay. Then to finish like your story and your journey. So you're a mastering engineer. You see all kinds of genres, all kinds of people, all kinds of mistakes they make. Now, if you are a musician now starting and you have a band and you want to record your first record and you don't have a budget, or for some reason you already decided you're going to do it yourself, whatever the reason is, what would you probably do? I mean, that's hard to imagine because you already know what to do, and like
right. But like, okay, so say,
but what would you probably do? What do you think does the average musician do, and what do you think you should do today? Like, with what's available.
Like
today,
knowing what I know, how would I recommend somebody start out? Pretty much.
That's the one part of the question, and the other part of the question is, what do you think people who don't know how to do it? What do you think they do? What's the thing that you intuitively do if you're a musician and start record these days, and maybe what you see people do a lot, and then what's your recommendation to do instead?
So it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of like a new musician just recording for the first time.
Yeah.
But I think like if they're a rock band, they would probably try and record live, because I'm only saying that because a lot of new bands that have approached me to like produce them think that's how they're going to record, right? They just like hear that some band like Kings of Leon or something did their first record that way, so that's how records are made. But it's probably not the right call. So that's how you think you're going to record. Now, don't do it that way. It's what I recommend. No, I think I would recommend, like knowing what I know now, I would recommend not just beating your head against the wall and trying to figure it out. I would just recommend like getting a basic education in it online. Like it's so available now. Like that's why we're doing this. So why we're having this conversation is to make it easier for people, right? Like so you don't have to just guess. So I would go the education route. I would get a really like you probably already have a computer, so you just have to get like an interface. I would totally be like in my case, get if I had to do it, I would be like, okay, I've got my laptop. I'm going to get a little interface, like a Focusrite Scarlett. It's like $200 or something, 2 ins. I would program drums using the software I get for free, probably. Like Reaper's, like, I'm pretty sure Reaper's free if you want it to be. And exactly. I'm pretty sure there's virtual instruments there. Like you could probably program drums on there, or GarageBand or something even, I would program what I could and then record everything else, like my guitars and stuff. I'm a guitarist, so this is a little biased, right? But like $300 later or something, I've got everything I need to do my first recording. And if I do a good job on the tracking of what I need to, it's going to sound good. The program stuff's going to sound good. It's going to sound programmed, but it's going to sound like that program stuff sounds good, right? Yeah, and I'm going to be miles ahead. Like if you do that and make a song this week, if you go buy, like spend $300 on a mic and an interface and record a song with a free DAW, you'll have something that sounded better than I was making like 4 years into this in a week, right? True. Like, and you just learned how because I just told you, so just do it. Exactly. And then if you go and like the tracking stuff's the hard stuff, so you just go to selfrecordingband.com, right? and check out those articles. You're going to be miles ahead on how to record a guitar. You're going to understand how important tuning and phase are, just because I've been screaming about it this whole episode. And So that's how I do it. That's like the step-by-step getting started and instantly being better than I was guide.
So true. So true. But I mean, like, it sounds crazy, and it kind of hurt to hear that, because it's true that like years into doing that, like really the recordings and mixes still sucked.
Yeah.
And you can do so much with it. And there's that leads me to this thing that I also always tell people, and you kind of said it as well, is that while recording and producing and the creative part is actually the thing that matters the most, the hardest part to do is probably mixing, because it just takes experience. It's just the way it is. Like, it's not, you cannot learn it as quickly. It's just not possible. I've never heard anybody make a really competitive, like professional, super cool sounding mix within a couple of weeks or something. That's just not going to happen. And so the cool thing about today and about the tools that are available there is you don't even, for starters, just to make your own first recording, your demo, and like just playing around with it and getting first results. Like, forget about the mixing. You just need to program stuff, play the guitar to it, sing to it, and it will sound better than what I mixed, like doing it sometime, like a couple of months or years even in, because I did mostly bands. I didn't program drums even. I always worked with real drums. I always worked in shitty rooms. Like the source material was just awful. I didn't know how to really mix. I just tried and failed. And ultimately the results just sounded like crappy basement demos, you know? Yep. So, and if you take GarageBand or any other software program drums and then play into a good DI box, and you know how to play your instrument, and it's a good instrument, and then you sing with a decent $100 microphone, it will probably sound better than my mixes back then.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's they're very lucky. Anybody getting into this is very lucky right now. Like, things are awesomely convenient and affordable right now, and there's more education than you know what to do with. I'm sure, Benedict, you're pumping out more education than they can keep up with. So, it's a great time. Even like, I've had bands send me pre-production stuff, so I get bands to send me scratch tracks essentially of the song, and whenever I can, I try and get them to send me like isolated ones, you know. So I have like a drum track, a vocal, and a guitar or whatever. And this one band recorded the drums with their iPhone, but he just had a click in and he did a count in so I could line it up, and like, I had drums in the demo recording, right? Like, using a phone. Like, there's no excuse.
Crazy. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So true. So, well, to finish this off, and just again, I mean, people by now, they already know that you know what you're talking about, and they like, this was a super, at least I think so, super helpful, super in depth already, like, conversation. I didn't even think it would go that way, but it's cool that we already shared this much stuff with people.
Yeah, that was great,
and so people by now should know that you know your what you're talking about. But still, can you maybe just tell us, and it's totally allowed to brag here, can you just give us some milestones, some stuff that you achieved during your career as a musician or producer or mastering engineer, just some credits, just so people know, like, you really know your shit.
Right.
You know?
Okay. Bragging time. So with the band, I mean, like, I think I mentioned, we've done some like pretty wicked festivals where we had thousands and thousands of people out in front of us. It's pretty awesome. We've got like millions of streams going on, and then on like the audio side of being a professional mixing and mastering and producer kind of guy,
and you had a Billboard.
Oh yeah, we had
right?
a Billboard hit. Yeah, the band got a Billboard hit, and I did engineer on that, but not exclusively. That was with Rats on there as well, and a great, you know, the guys I play with are just awesome musicians too, so they made it easy. But fun fact, that Billboard rock hit, all the backing vocals and all the keys were recorded through a Focusrite Scarlett in my living room. So. There you go. And that's the same album that cost just a fortune. I don't even want to say how much it cost. I'm like, not sure if I should.
You don't have to. I mean, you can if you want.
Like, I'm just trying to think if it would matter to anyone. I don't think it would. Like I said, honestly, like
ballpark
with
ballpark
marketing,
number.
it was like around $60,000 Canadian, which is a lot of money, right? That's like
that's a whole lot of money.
That's absurd. But we recorded in like the nicest studio in the world, and then we also recorded in my living room for it. So so yeah, you can get by with a Focusrite Scarlett. You'll be fine. So we got a Billboard Rock hit. I think it got to number 23. I think I'm gonna have to fact check myself on that, which was really cool. I've had like over a dozen, maybe 24 songs get onto radio that I've produced or mixed or mastered. And the Spotify streams from the clients I've worked with are some number I can't even think of either. Been worked with artists from who I don't know now that I've done this documentary. Like, I don't know, like before the documentary, it was something like 8 countries, and now it's got to be a lot more. So it's been a while.
Do you even know what time zone you're in right now, or is it like
right now? I'm GMT -8 PST, so Pacific Standard Time. Yeah, so I've got that pretty on lock because I have to.
Yeah, okay.
Otherwise, I'm too confused.
Okay, so your body still like you're not. I imagine like you're past that, like your body doesn't need to adapt anymore. Like you've left that behind.
It does. So there's days where I feel very old. I'm 28, by the way, but oddly enough, Toronto, which is like I think 4 hours time difference, that messed me up more than any trip so far. Like, and we went to Africa. It took us like 30 hours to get to Ghana in Africa, and I felt way better after that than I did with a like 4-hour trip to Toronto and being like 3 or 4 hours ahead. It's weird. But
it's weird.
I recover pretty quick. My immune system seems to be on tip-top shape because I'm just like eating food from around the world every day. But
that's cool.
Life is good, man.
Awesome. So yeah, you've been to a lot of countries, and anything? I interrupted you with my nonsense here. Anything else you wanted to add?
I mean, not off the top of my head. I don't know.
Well, that's enough. That's enough, anyways. I mean, like that you just said you're 28. That's so I always forget that. Like I'm 32, and it feels like career-wise you're so ahead of me, and I'm proud of what I did, of course. But like imagining that you're like 4 years younger than I am and have done all that is just insane to me, and that's exactly why it's super cool to have you on this podcast. And I think we're gonna unpack a lot of stuff that's super valuable for our audience.
It's gonna be fun, man. And thank you. I look up to you, so this is ironic, but for those listening, cool. Like I just like badgered Benny with emails, like pretty much like before we got to know each other. I just sent him questions like constantly because you're great at business, and your mixes sound incredible as well. So I was just like, dang it, this guy's cool. I want to figure out how he's doing it. So it goes back to what I've been talking about this whole time. I just like I mirror people. I find great people like yourself, and I realized that there was a lot I could learn from you, and that turned into a cool friendship as well. So here we are.
Yeah, it does. And people like you see what happens if you are like that, and if you're open, and if you like put yourself out there, contact people, watch them what they do, like because this is a cool friendship, obviously, but this is also an opportunity for both of us. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Like we're like what started as an email conversation led to a friendship and to being collaborators in a way. And you just don't know what happens. Like you might ask somebody for advice while you're recording or writing or songs or whatever. And that person, like years down the line, might offer you whatever, a job, a gig, or I don't know. Like, just be open and just absorb. Be a sponge, like really, as much as you can.
Be a sponge, I like that for sure. We should. You might already have this down, but we should totally do an episode on finding a mentor in this field.
I haven't, but we should.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Okay, awesome.
I'm gonna make a note here. Yeah, we totally should. Absolutely.
Because that's just wouldn't have got anywhere without my mentors. So
yeah, true that. And I have to say I never had that. I never really had that.
Well, it's
I had
perfect.
a lot of online education,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I never have. I have online education and self-education a lot, but I live in the absolute middle of nowhere, and like. There would like for what I do, I don't know anybody near me who could have taught me that. So, but that is part of the reason why I think my progress was pretty slow, especially compared to people like you, because I never had that mentor thing. I've never like walked into a bigger studio or so for the first 7 or 8 years that I've been doing this.
Right.
And I just figured it out completely on my own. And that's why I was pretty slow.
Well,
so
I think
part
that'd
of
be
the
like a
reason why I was
fascinating
pretty slow.
conversation, because there's like, at this point of our life, we're kind of, now we're doing both, right?
Yeah.
And it took us a while to figure out that we could do both, but yeah, that'd be a great conversation to have.
Yeah, let's do that. Right. Then I think that was a pretty cool episode. Like I learned a ton about you that I didn't know before.
Yeah, man.
And
that was fun. Thank you.
Awesome. And I think it's pretty, as I said, pretty impressive. And I think there's a lot of value for our audience. And the next episode will be Malcom interviewing me and me telling my story, so that, you know, those of you who don't know me already, know what I'm about. And so.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, man. It'll be fun flipping it around on you.
I'm kind of nervous, like as I always am in these situations, but let's see how that goes. And after that, we'll start with the real, quote unquote, real content here, because now we kind of told you what this podcast is about, and we are introducing ourselves. And then from episode 4 on, we will be talking about specific topics, and we will cover a lot of stuff. We will cover lots of the stuff that we were talking today here in more in depth, and we try to be more specific, and we are also looking forward to your suggestions and to your feedback and input. And if you want to suggest topics, if you have questions, if you think what we said is not true, or if you agree, whatever you want to tell us, please email podcast@theselfrecordingband.com. As always, you find the show notes to this episode like on the website, and the link is theselfrecordingband.com/2. So it's always the number of the episode, and then, it's always the URL, theselfrecordingband.com/ and then the number of the episode. It's always that way. And other than that, I just hope you check out the website. Malcom did a great job plugging it in this episode a couple of times. So please go to theselfrecordingband.com and check out the blog there, check the videos, the articles, and leave questions there, comment there. Just check it out, get familiar with the whole thing. Join the Facebook community, just check it out. There's a whole lot of stuff to explore there. And we'll see you, or you hear us, or however you say that in the podcast world. So
we're going to work on our endings.
Looking forward to the next episodes and to get this going. So thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.